So, Netflix just recently released Avatar: The Last Airbender onto its streaming platform, and like many other people who grew up on this non-anime anime series, we made it one of the most popular things on Netflix to watch. And after rewatching the series, I was kind of put into a nostalgia trip. I fell in love all over again with the world, the characters, and the eastern feel of The Last Airbender. So I started reading the comics, and I watched the sequel series, and I even decided to rewatch that, live action film. Well, okay, so it's been 10 years since that movie came out, which means it has also been 10 years since I watched that movie. I remember this day fondly because me and my friends split into two groups. One group went to go see the latest Twilight film, while me, an intellectual, I chose to see The Last Airbender, and I can't remember my exact reaction to the film, but from the fact that I never rewatched it ever again, it was either one of the worst things in the world, or it was a modern masterpiece that I knew I was going to talk about a decade later. So, maybe it's both. I guess we'll just find out, right? But first, let's talk about how this fantastic cartoon got turned into this, film, I guess. It started when this man, M. Night Shyamalan, was announced to be directing the film a couple weeks after the cliffhanger ending of the second season. M. Night said the reason that he got interested in the Last Airbender film was because his daughter at the time wanted to dress up as Katara for Halloween, and said he was excited to watch and see what would happen at the climax of season 3 at the time. M. Night has stated in interviews that he was interested in this project because the world of the original creators Brian Konietzki and Michael Dante DiMartino had created. He also said he did bring on the creators to hear his outline of the series, and they sounded gung-ho for it, but he had to cut things out to make it into a film. But in an interview with the original creators, they had a different story. Though, you see, their names are on the film as executive producers, they state that they really had nothing to do with the film. The links about both of these interviews I'm talking about right now are going to be down below. But the creators were told that the series was going to be produced into a movie. From the interview that I listened to, the two were always weary of the series being turned into that film. But if it had to be done, they wanted to do it. But it seems like the execs didn't want them to. But when the studio attached M. Night Shyamalan, they could only hope that it would turn out good. At first, they did get to give their input, but as production kept going, the two felt their input was overlooked. It felt like their creation was being turned into a vision of just only M. Night Shyamalan. That he had his own ideas where the story would go and how he wanted to tell it. Like, I get it and I completely understand. Adaptations can and should have different tones to the original source material to make it seem different but yet similar. But here, it kind of sounded like someone's original idea owned by a corporation, and the corporation only thought, hey, this has a huge fan base, this will make us money. Who cares if the vision is kind of changed? As long as the name is on there, we will make revenue. But they didn't call it Avatar: The Last Airbender. They just called it The Last Airbender. Yes, we clearly understand that it's the same thing, but they literally just took out Avatar because they didn't want to compete against James Cameron's film. And so that's how we got The Last Airbender as the title. And to me, I think that is the first mistake this movie would make. But they were right. We all went out to see it. Most people went to see it because they were die-hard Avatar fans. While I liked Avatar the cartoon okay enough, I just didn't want to see the new Twilight film, so that's how they got my $12, because it was in 3D. So the budget being about $150 million, they made about double back, making about $319 million worldwide. But because of the negative response of the movie in the US, it only made $131 million in America. At this time, this film was the highest grossing Nickelodeon film, and would not be dethroned until a year after, when The Adventures of Tintin was released. And as of 2020, it is still the fourth highest grossing Nickelodeon film, only being beat out by The Adventures of Tintin, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and SpongeBob Sponge Out of Water. I mean, usually you can get a sequel if your movie does a little bit well over budget. I mean, look at any other mediocre adaptation that ended up getting a sequel, like Ghost Rider. I think the reason we never got The Last Airbender Book 2 Earth was because of the fans. This is probably one of the few times I will praise an angry fan base for stopping something that in general wasn't probably the best thing to happen to them. But before the movie came out, there was already controversy. Being Asian American, you hear whitewashing a lot, and to me this is the first time it really kind of hit me hard because most of the cast was all white. The interview I have linked down below, M. Night Shyamalan brings up this controversy, and he says this.
For me, this was an incredible opportunity to be culturally diverse and be organic at the same time. And so, the thing about anime is that it's an art form that includes culturally ambiguous features. That's what they do. Big eyes, and sometimes blue eyes, and sometimes big, Indian eyes, and everything is very, interesting, sharp features in this. And it's meant to...
So, what he said kind of bothered me. A little bit. A lot, really, but, He claims that he was being culturally diverse, and that if you look at anime, they have culturally ambiguous features, and you are meant to see yourself in those characters. So, not just to be weeb trash right now, but unless stated otherwise, most anime or manga are literally based in Japan and Japanese culture. The only time it isn't really Japanese is when we decided to Americanize a lot of animes like Pokemon and Sailor Moon in the 90s. Ergo, that's how we got the infamous Pokemon powdered donuts actually being onigiri memes.
These donuts are great! Jelly-filled are my favorite! Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut!
So, if I am being totally honest with myself, I've been stewing on this a lot lately. Because I'm Asian American, like I said. And growing up, and even now, the lack of diversity in Asian roles is astonishing. I mean, yes, sure, we got Crazy Rich Asians from 2 years ago, opening the floodgates, and then The Farewell was a win for Asian American actors and actresses, but I guess if I'm looking at this personally, for me it's super shitty because yes, this series wasn't made by people of Asian descent, but they really did their research on Asian culture and they took it super seriously. So yeah, I'm sorry, it sucks that the best they could do is cast white people as the heroes, but at the time I know how American marketers were thinking. If they weren't white, they weren't right. People can't relate to them, and it sucks because I know that that is a process that actors and actresses have to go through of Asian descent. Like, there are entire threads of people saying they didn't get a role because they were too Asian, and I hate that so much. But wait, hold on, they are diverse because the villains are of Indian descent, and so that's a type of Asian Kian, so it's not all whitewashing. So fun fact, before Dev Patel got casted, they originally casted Jesse McCartney, who is white. So all of the other Fire Nation actors were already casted because Jesse had to drop out during pre-production. So that means, what were they gonna do? Were they gonna give him brown face? Because that sounds like a terrible idea. But even bunching up all of the Fire Nation as Indian American actors or just Indian actors is wrong. Yes, Dev Patel and Asif Mandvi are Indian, but Uncle Iroh is played by an Iranian actor. The Fire Lord is played by Cliff Curtis, who is, yes, in fact a race chameleon, but he's actually a Kiwi from New Zealand, so there you go. But I guess my problem comes from, yeah, the villains are people of color, but the heroes are white, and it kind of gets weird because there's always the shitty trope of the white savior, and I know that wasn't supposed to be a thing they were trying to hit at, but by the end of the movie it just kind of feels like it. I guess I probably wouldn't have a huge problem with the whitewashing so much if they didn't still keep the Eastern lore and vibe of the series. Even the Fire Nation being Indian doesn't really matter because they're still wearing garb and armor inspired by both Chinese and feudal Japanese culture. And the Water Tribe, all their garb is based on the Inuit culture, and everyone in the Water Tribe besides the main characters all look like the part until we reach the Northern Water Tribe, where they said, fuck it, make them white. The only time that made it not look jarring is the Earth Kingdom, because they were all Asian there, which begs the question, they could get these Asian extras for this scene, but all the Northern Water Tribe soldiers are just a bunch of random white dudes? So I'm done with my weird whitewashing rant. I'm really sorry if that was a little bit longer than expected, but honestly, I was just stewing, and the more I thought about it, the more I got frustrated with the idea of whitewashing. So let's talk about another controversy. Let's talk about how they pronounce words wrong. Like, Aang became Ong, and Iroh became Iro, and Sokka became Soka. Like, they wanted to get more Eastern feels, which is ironic because most of the cast is, well, you know, white. Okay, for real, I am done. Now we all know what whitewashing is, and it's shit. We need to be better. We are done with that conversation. But like, I mean, come on. I would be more inclined to give it a pass if the original source material was from a book, but we had almost half a decade of them pronouncing those names and words a certain way. So now it's time to talk why this is a bad adaptation of an already good TV series. The problem with turning any TV series into a movie is because TV series are meant to be watched episodic, with each episode filling in an important part of the story. So what we get here is more like the SparkNotes version of the first book. The first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender was roughly around 22 episodes, so like, let's go with like it was about 6 hours long. And the movie itself was under 2 hours, like I think it was about like an hour and 41 minutes, which means they had to cut about 2/3 of the original source material out. And stuff like that could be easily done. You've seen novels turned to movies like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, but I think the bigger problem was the flow of the film. Like, character development is never seen, only talked about or narrated. Like, Sokka and the Moon Princess seem to be romantically involved, but we never really see it. Aang is mastering waterbending, but it's like an abridged cliff note. Not seeing these characters' growth make you feel less involved. It's also missed story beats like Aang's rage taking him over, combining with the ocean spirit and rampaging the Fire Nation, representing disharmony and the lack of balance since the yin and yang duality was not there anymore. That's why Yui's sacrifice felt more emotional in the series, because it brought balance and harmony back. Aang in the beginning of the series could only go to the Avastar state in times of rage or stress, but in the movie, he can just go into it and destroy the fleets. Yui's sacrifice seems less emotional because of this. I hate that this video seems like a deconstruction of a movie that was already widely hated, and it feels like I'm just opening up an old wound, which is, of course, very understandable. So the question I had to ask myself is, then why am I talking about this? And the answer is, I haven't seen this movie in 10 years, besides the occasional meme about it being a bad anime adaptation. So, what is it like as a movie then? Well, spoiler alert, it really isn't that good either. So, sorry, this will be me ragging on the film from 10 years ago that I didn't like when I was 16, and I still don't like it, but for different reasons. So, here's why it's a bad film. It's a bad martial arts film. The opening is filmed like it looks like it's supposed to be a classic Shaw Brothers intro. Something you'd see in like 5 Deadly Venoms when they're showing off their different fighting styles. But then they do the martial arts, and man, that is so awful. Honestly, when I watch the fights, I am just ridiculously bored. Like, okay, I don't think the dialogue is fun, and I don't really find the story that interesting. Usually in martial arts films, the fights are really cool. But these fights just seem super vanilla. And this is a movie where you can and should go balls to the walls with the wire fu. Like, again, that intro to most people seemed lame and out of place, but when I saw it, I was like, this is a chance to make it feel like a fun and whimsical kung fu film of the late 70s and 80s. But instead, you get these lackluster fight scenes that seem extremely generic and badly edited. Not only that, not looking at it through the eyes of the Avatar cartoon, but how they portray bending is really weird. The power scaling is off. You can move a ton of water, fire can be manipulated like Dragon Ball Z ki blasts. You can make tiny tornadoes out of your hands, but it takes 6 people to move a tiny boulder. Wait, hold on. I guess it only needs 1 person. But they can also make giant rock balls without the 6 people? Like, honestly, I found this kind of inconsistency of the power of the bending really jarring, I suppose. Like, This again going back to not showing but telling us. The exposition dump about how Katara and Aang both learned to master waterbending is told to us. We don't really see the progression, so it is extremely jarring to see Katara in the beginning not being able to control her powers, but then in the climactic battle with Zuko, she's able to freeze him easily and control a ton of water with ease. Like, the progression of power growth doesn't feel earned. The more I think about it, the way it was written kinda sucks. Also, I think a problem with the bending is the CGI. I feel the CGI is extremely lazy and lackluster. Like, they're just doing the bare bones with the CGI. Like, waterbending should feel graceful, firebending should feel aggressive, and earthbending should feel powerful. But they all seem just meh. Like, airbending is the most interesting when it comes to the bendings. But the CGI animals seem jarring as well, but that was 10 years ago, I guess. But to be honest, there really isn't anything that felt natural about this film. And here's where we go into the dialogue. So the reason the dialogue is weird is because it is slow and dramatic. Zuko's scenes about pretty girls is one of just the awkward moments I think about when it comes to talking about dialogue. The problem in general is the writing, in my opinion, at least for Dev Patel and Uncle Iroh's actor Sean Taub, because we've seen them act and they have range in their other roles. Bad writing also makes bad actors sound even worse, which leads to the problem with Aang's actor, Noah Ringer. When you hire someone who isn't an actor and only went to acting school a month before production, you aren't going to get the best performance. Finding a child actor is hard to begin with, and a child actor can sometimes make or break your production. His dialogue sounds forced and overdramatic, like everything is life or death. So when they try to do comedic scenes, they all just kind of fall flat. Like, it doesn't feel natural. Like I said, this feels like it is trying to be a dramatic story, but it is just flying over everything that should make it dramatic. Again, we are not reading a novel, we are watching a visual medium. Show us the characters' feelings and growth, don't tell us with exposition. But I am like 7 pages into this script, and because I am pretentious, I always like to end with what I like about a media that I just watched and reviewed. So, like, all the background stuff looks great, all the set pieces in this film are well made, like, the places where the spirits are swimming looks really cool. It's like a legit super zen garden. I love the steampunk aesthetics of the Fire Nation ships. And I do like how you can tell the difference between the Southern Water Tribe and the Northern Water Tribe. The Southern seems more indigenous, where the Northern Water Tribe seems more modern. I like both of the air temples, they seem really cool, and I feel like it was a place where monks would have lived in. I also like Aang's tattoos, they seem like something a spiritual leader would have. And I also think the costume design is really great as well. Again, I have always loved the Fire Nation's armor design, and I like the Easter influences in the Earth Kingdom's attire because it makes sense. One of my favorite designs is the fact that Sokka's boomerang is made out of bone instead of metal. Like, again, he's from a hunting and gathering type of community, so it seems natural. Like, holy shit, you can take care of your source material in character's costume, but not the character themselves? How does this happen? So, The Last Airbender is a weird film that kind of, in my mind, would affect the Avatar series a lot. I feel this film left a bad taste in the executive's mouth, which would then, I think, affected how they would treat The Legend of Korra, bouncing it around spots on the channel to finally just putting it out all online. This movie was probably marketed as the next young adult thing. And that is where I think the problem started. Because when you try to make something become the next big thing, it usually fails. I'm looking at you, Percy Jackson and Divergent, but I feel like that the creators got their redemption in The Legend of Korra. Like, that show isn't perfect, but they tried to follow their own original vision. And maybe one day I'll talk about it, but I am never going to watch The Last Airbender ever again. This film will never cross my mind whatsoever after all this is done. But I don't regret watching this because my philosophy on criticism when it comes to media is I don't want to criticize something if I've just seen it from afar. And because I haven't seen The Last Airbender in 10 years, if I wanted to have an honest and real opinion of it, I would have to rewatch it. And this is my honest opinion of The Last Airbender 10 years later. I think I feel the same way about this film like I did about it 10 years ago, but I think I'm a little bit more mature about it. Kind of. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. If you want to help support me, you can go to my Patreon, the link is down below. Or just like, subscribe, and share helps. Click the bell icon down below to make sure you get to see the latest videos, because I'm going to try to keep making weekly to bi-weekly videos like this. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. Also, you can follow me on Twitter to see what I'm doing, and check me out on the Tangent Podcast. It's a podcast I host with my friends, and we're just a bunch of goofs. So, as always, keep on keeping on, have a good day, friends, and whatever you're going through, you got this.